It's receiving it. We should be good. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this University of Connecticut Town Hall focused on answering questions of University of Connecticut staff. Let me start by saying that a university's most valuable asset is its people, and our staff are critical to the mission of this university, critical to our research, our teaching, and to healthcare. And it's great to have you join us today. I think there are over 400 people so far and growing. And it reminds me of the last time we gathered in person was for the staff awards ceremony in Wilbur Cross in what seems like an eternity ago, which was only a few months. And it's a fond memory of how touched I was by the dedication of our staff to our mission, the warmth and the celebration that you all expressed in each other and your excellence. Since that time, you've worked very hard and helped us to successfully navigate this global pandemic, and I'm so appreciative to all of you. You've worked hard, and I know you have a scheduled pay raise coming, and I just want to say that it is absolutely deserved and overdue. This meeting was originally scheduled to give you the opportunity to ask questions about our reentry plans for the fall and on how they affect you as staff. But also, there have been many budget questions, and so it's also an opportunity to ask questions about our budget. I know there are many questions surrounding my open letter to you from this morning and our recent meetings with your union leaders. Let me thank the union leaders for meeting with us and for their partnership and their mutual concern for your well-being and for the university. Just to recap my letter from this morning, as everyone knows, these are very difficult times. Many lives have been lost. There have been widespread job losses and pay cuts across the state and the nation. And we've been relatively fortunate as UConn employees to continue to be paid throughout the crisis. Unfortunately, the university financial situation is not quite as good. Our budget office is laying out options for addressing a forecast shortfall of over $50 million in the coming year. And when you look at the priorities I've given to the leadership in terms of making budget cuts, and those are prevent long-term harm to the university, prevent harm to this generation of students to enable them to graduate successfully, and to protect the UConn family. There does not appear to be a path forward that achieves all those goals. In response to that, our senior management has asked to contribute to the shortfall through freezes and furloughs. And reluctantly, we have asked your unions for help, and we'll be asking similarly of non-union managers. So with that as a sober opening, I hope we can have an opportunity to hear questions and concerns and answer as many of them as we possibly can. Obviously, questions that pertain to negotiations with the union, we'd like to answer those, but we are bound to restricted to answer them through your union leaders. So I apologize if some of our answers will be we will answer those, but through your union leaders, and direct you to those union leaders to get the answers. The other questions we're absolutely open for. So I'd like to turn it over now to our moderator for today's town hall. And that is, she is Emily Zangari, and she's a critical member of our university communications team. Over to you, Emily.
Thank you, President Katsouleas. As you mentioned, we have been taking questions through our email the last couple of days, and we will also be taking live questions from the chat box on our YouTube stream. So feel free to put those there, and we will do the best we can to answer all the questions within the hour. So with that, staying on the topic of furlough days, if they are required, will staff be told the days they need to take off for proposed 12 furlough days, or will employees be able to decide those days with supervisor approval?
Emily, this is Chris DeLello, and good afternoon, everyone. If there were to be 12 furlough days, flexibility will be provided. There may be a few days that will be identified as furlough days, but yes, employees will generally be able to decide what days they can use as furlough days, but we would ask for manager or their formal supervisor approval.
Will staff be made redundant? And if so, when will we know what that looks like?
Sure, I'll take that question. You know, I understand this question to really ask is whether or not some positions or jobs will no longer be necessary at the university. At the present time, the university, I think, is still in the process of converting and realigning the important work that we need to do. We don't know yet how long the environment of this pandemic will occur. You know, we want to maintain the safety and the health of our staff and students first and foremost. I think as we continually assess our organization and the services we deliver in response to those changes, and while we view the pandemic as hopefully short term, there could be changes that occur as a result of that response that may result in permanent changes. I just think it's simply too early to identify what those will be.
Sticking with another HR question for you, Chris.
Sure.
What can we expect to be told about the employee sharing program, and what responsibilities will we be taking on in that role?
Sure, I can answer that. And just for everyone's information, we did release with last evening's coronavirus communication a link to the UConn Employee Exchange Program. With that link comes a variety and explanation of the entire program, along with about a dozen FAQs. But first, I want to thank our union leaders for working so quickly with us to make the implementation of this program possible prior to the end of the fiscal year. Within the context of the program, you know, basically we're going to be developing a participant pool. HR will maintain a list of employees who are currently reporting that work might not be as frequent, and managers may have eligible employees that work is no longer possible. We hope to allow people to initiate what we're calling an employee exchange. Managers with a need of temporary help or staff support will reach out to HR. There will be a form and a workflow that will be required. Managers completing the full form will include an overview of the work that they're hopeful will be needed. And HR will contact eligible employees. And you know, if there's more than one volunteer for a job, the one with the most bargaining unit seniority will be given the assignment. If there are no volunteers, we will look to one with the least bargaining unit seniority to be given the assignment. But there's an awful lot of flexibility within that. We're really hopeful this will give us an opportunity to maintain the community that we hope for and allow for that sharing of duties to occur that will help us all.
Thank you. We're going to hop over to a couple questions we got from the chat. One being, will job searches in progress continue? And a follow-up to that, if there's a hiring freeze, why are there so many jobs posted?
Sure. And I know, Scott, you may have some reference here as well, but we did always say that jobs that were in progress during the hiring freeze would be reviewed and would continue. if the job was still justified.
That's right. And this is Scott Jordan. I would also add that the hiring freeze is somewhat flexible. The truth is the university has substantial attrition at any given time, and that there are critical jobs that need to be filled. What we have put in place is a workflow that requires for any job to be posted, for there to be a request by the manager wanting to post the job, approval by human resources, approval by the budget office, approval by the cognizant executive vice president. So that would mean either me, President Katsouleas, Provost Lejwe, or Dr. Andy, and that no job gets posted without those approvals. So yes, the university is continuing to function, and sometimes that means that we do need to fill vacant positions. But the hiring freeze has to date substantially slowed down the pace of hiring, and as well as the spending freeze has substantially slowed down the pace of spending. And our best estimate now is that we're trending about $10 million below expectation to spending in the last couple of months of the fiscal year as a result of these controls.
Jumping back into an HR question, what is the guidance on staff reporting work in person? Specifically, if our unit is directed to return to in-person operations, but they do not feel comfortable returning due to health conditions, can they complete their job remotely? Must they return in person? And what kind of documentation would be required for that?
Okay, I embed about 3 questions there, Emily, but let me try to break it down. Regarding what guidance on staff reporting is necessary to work in person. Well, first, I think the university expects that a majority of staff work can continue to be done remotely, with exceptions when work will be required to be performed on site. And in addition, with the return to some of our in-person services, the convenience of whether or not the work can be done on campus versus remotely, I will boldly say, will not be a primary consideration. It will be the work that has to be done on campus to support returning students and other critical work, much like the determinations we made in the last few months. The question, I think, part 2 of that was if our unit has been directed to return to in-person operations, and I don't feel comfortable due to a health condition. Let's take apart that question. I want people to always feel comfortable that they should work with their manager. I don't think that this question has a one-size-fits-all answer. And each situation really deserves an individual review. And I think that's appropriate. Based on the nature of the work, if the job is student-facing, what are the individual employee's own circumstances, and then what work has to be done and the physical environment that the employee may be returning to. And so I think following masking and social distancing guidelines that I know will be addressed, and have been addressed, but I'm sure questions will be raised in this town hall. The goal is to reduce the risk of transmission. So if someone has a health condition, what kind of documentation is required? First and foremost, I want everyone to feel comfortable that managers will not and should not accept private medical records. And any information that you think is important to a determination, I would like you to reach out to HR in these circumstances. Direct all your questions to hr@uconn.edu. A team of employees under the leadership of Eliza Wilder in HR operations is reviewing that website every morning and every evening. And we're trying to develop a quick turnaround time on some of the very personal questions that are coming in. And I think that's the appropriate process to follow.
We had a question about PPE. Will individual departments need to purchase necessary supplies, meaning gloves, sanitizers, wipes, masks, etc., from suppliers on our own, or will we be able to purchase that through the university?
This is Scott Jordan. The university is procuring PPE centrally and is distributing to departments at no cost to the departments. We're also paying for them centrally. So with regard to PPE, departments should first go to central stores. And if the particular PPE or hand sanitizer or materials that they're looking for is not available through central stores, then only then should they go on their own. There may be some specialized equipment a department might want and need, and we remove all barriers to departments getting what they need. But first and foremost, we are providing those through central stores, and we are not charging departments for those supplies.
Does that apply to regional campuses as well?
Absolutely. Yes.
We had a question about whether we will be testing asymptomatic people.
I'll take that question. Yes is the simple answer. So let's go through where we are at testing at this juncture. So the governor's guidance applies to student-facing employees regarding testing, but there's really no strict definition of that category. In fact, as we start to review what jobs are student-facing, there are circumstances where jobs are not primarily student-facing, but would be at this time that are really an issue to take into account. We're working in the next few weeks with all of the divisions to address who among their staff will have student-facing responsibilities, and it's our current intent that those will be tested first. We have already started a testing protocol and pilot in some key areas on campus. We are working with our partners at UCH, which I'll just take a commercial break, have been wonderful to deal with, to address testing at stores and our regional campuses right now for the full reentry. The position we'll make regarding testing will be communicated clearly in the next few weeks, but we would, in addition to the student-facing employees, our current intent would be to provide all employees the availability for a test, including the non-student facing employees before reentry. We're working with UConn Health to determine the volume and the velocity of testing that will be required between July 15th and August 15th. And throughout all the testing, the protocols are in place that whether you're symptomatic or asymptomatic, the tests will be provided, and they will be provided at university expense. We have also developed protocols for the case if someone tests positive, whether asymptomatic or symptomatic, and those will be communicated in the near future as well.
We had a question about what the university's plans are for contact tracing campus-wide.
So I can take that. It's Terry Dominguez. Good afternoon, everyone from Environmental Health and Safety. So contact tracing, we do have a general plan. We will be working closely with our local boards of health, local health departments, to support the contact tracing, our contact tracing needs through them. And we'll also be looking at supporting their needs for the state by providing possibly volunteers within UConn to support the state's contact tracing needs.
We had a question about, since the CDC has said the coronavirus does not spread on surfaces, why are we concerning ourselves with making sure we clean everything?
So Emily, Chris, did you want to take that?
No, I'll defer to you, and that's great. Thanks, Terry.
Sure. So certainly that was a message or a misconception that was reported in the popular press, but in essence, what CDC was trying to do is revise their requirements or their recommendations, but they were just clarifying what they were trying to say. What they were trying to say was that the primary mode of transmission of this virus is person to person, and that while there's no direct evidence of it being contracted from object to person, because of other respiratory viruses acting similarly, they believe that it's possible. So in that sense, it's prudent to go ahead and disinfect and using appropriate products to do that. So the primary thing would be person to person, and we're doing that with social or physical distancing, wearing face masks, staying home when we're sick, and then of course we're supplementing that with the disinfecting. Want to add the hand washing too, very important.
We received a question from our live chat. If concessions are being made by union members, are we guaranteed that the same cuts will be made across the whole university to both union and non-union staff?
I think there's a simple answer to that question. Yes.
Are there any ways to find out what specific budget cuts are being or have been implemented, both now and going forward?
Yeah, sure. This is Scott Jordan. I can say that it's the university is made up of many departments, literally hundreds of departments, and central budget administration is run through the schools and colleges and through the departments, and that it's often hard for central administration for ourselves to know all the many cuts that are being made across the entire university. I can say that we have so far in the budget process sought and have worked through the colleges and schools and through the departments to make substantial cuts in the budget, and that individual managers, deans, and department heads and managers will be rolling those cuts out in the departments over time. Many of them are small, but they do add up. Many of them are in attrition, and what you will see is fewer people working at the university over time. But we can't point to specific initiatives or programs that have been eliminated. I can say that we have set goals for every department, though, to live within their budget, and that is every department at the university across the board.
Are layoffs being considered across the university?
Layoffs are one of the things that we have on our list of potential mechanisms for departments within their budgets. We do not have a plan at this time for a mass layoff at the university. As I said earlier, our budgets are managed mostly in the departmental level and at the school and college level. And that as individual managers of those areas are working through how to live within their budgets, they may contemplate layoffs. If that were, of course, we would do that within the bounds of the collective bargaining agreements that we have in place now. There are rules for these things, and we would follow them.
Are we hiring more cleaning staff? What is the university doing to deal with the tall order of sanitation?
The university is through our team has established cleaning protocols, including protocols within the residential life area. We have it is possible as they staff up and understand the workload that they will have in the fall, that they may bring on some temporary help to work to do more cleaning. As you may know, facilities maintenance on our campuses is done by both university employees and by contract employees, and that we may have to adjust the balance of those in order to make sure we're getting our cleaning done.
What will the university do in terms of providing signage and plexiglass installation in main areas of campus buildings?
Mm-hmm.
So I can take that one. So being part of a team of groups that are working on this issue, both our university planning as well as facilities operations, working together, identifying those needs and where things need to be installed. So certainly plexiglass is being considered for some of the, higher frequency of person-to-person contact. But there'll be some prioritization involved with that. But certainly it's on our radar and being worked on.
To that extent, will access to previously common shared areas be restricted, such as lunchrooms, gathering rooms, and can we hold any in-person meetings?
Take that one again. So certainly there will be some modification to population density, and so whether it's classrooms or office spaces, there'll be some cutting back on the amount of people in any given space. So lunchrooms, common areas, there would be some guidance provided as to how many should be in the space. Basically, you're going to be keeping that 6-foot distance, but if you do have common areas like that, you might want to restrict its use as much as possible. If you can eat your lunch in your cubicle rather than using the lunchroom to do that, that's preferred. So there's a lot of strategies that could be used to minimize that interaction person to person.
And, to add on to what Terry mentioned, we'd strongly encourage managers and employees to make video or teleconferencing options available for all meetings, including those that involve meetings of employees that are working on campus even. We've all gotten better and better at that in the past few months. So I see no reason why that shouldn't continue.
Due to common areas potentially being occupied by students when they return, will staff be staggered for break times? Will start times, end times of workdays change at all?
Yeah, I'd be glad to take that. Staggering of break times is a good strategy and is in keeping with the state guidance. As we always have, we're going to ask managers and employees to explore, as I've stated, the boundaries of creativity in addressing the level of flexibility to ensure the safety and well-being of everyone. There's not going to be a blanket statement by the university of what stop or start times should be for breaks or lunches during this time. If someone is uncomfortable with the times allowed, we're going to ask you to speak with your managers first to determine if solutions can be accomplished.
Has there been a hold on any new construction around campus?
There has not been a hold on new construction. We have reprioritized smaller projects. That there has been a change in the pace at which we're doing renovations and improvements inside of our building. So you will see some projects. Say if you're hoping to get your office painted this summer, that might not happen as our facilities team is reprioritized towards COVID response and cleaning and reconfiguring campus for social distancing. For major construction projects, those run through our university planning, design, and construction group. Those continue without delay. It's important within the broader context of the question, when a person might ask that is because they're concerned about the finances, that the construction projects are expensive. And to understand the answer to that, the context is that construction money is provided by the state through state bonding programs and is paid by the state and cannot be used to help the operating budget of the university and cannot be used to pay people. So they really are two very different budgets with their own sort of personality. And there has been no interruption or change to state funding for construction projects on campus. And the Science Quad and the Science One building and the work around that Gantt renovation are continuing on pace, and you will see that activity on campus over the course of the next year.
Can you speak to how the university plans to ensure the health and safety of our community from guests and visitors who tend to frequent campus for various reasons?
Sure.
Hi, this is Hans.
Oh, go ahead, Hans.
Hi, this is Hans Reinhardt. We've learned a lot over the last few months and how we can operate remotely and how we can reduce the density of people on campus. When we are working with vendors or other critical people that we need to have on campus to help support us, even more so when we have a more populated campus in the fall, we will be reaching out to vendors and other critical non-university staff to explain our expectations of safety, mask wearing, as well as all of our buildings will have signage on them that say what our expectations are to help keep a safe and healthy campus with reminders of physical distancing and mask wearing, washing hands, hand sanitizer. So there'll be multiple ways in which we are encouraging healthy and safe visitation to campus.
Following up with that, are buildings going to be remaining open to general public? Will offices have the ability to offer or provide a mask to visitors who arrive without one?
I'll take that, and it's very similar to my last answer. We rely on people coming to campus to help us support our mission. So we need to have critical vendors and guests that come and are important to the campus. Where our supply chain allows us to provide masks to guests and visitors, we will, but it'll be contingent upon being able to purchase and having a stockpile of masks to hand out. We want to encourage in any way that we can a safe and healthy presence on campus. And if that includes getting masks out, then that's what we'll try to do.
How will special payroll employees be affected by cuts?
That's a very short question with a very complex answer, but I'll try to make it brief. To Scott's earlier point, our organization leaders manage their budgets, and they do so in a way that's reflective of the needs at that time. As we know, we have a variety of special payroll employees and types of employees paid from that payroll system. It really depends. If a budget holder or leader believes that they can their budget by cutting that special payroll employee, they can. But again, it's really a determination of what type of employee it is.
What will be the plans to reopen the student union? Would it be open at all for students and or staff?
Hi. We will be reopening the student union, but we will be asking more of it. And so you will find spaces like the Student Union Theater being available as potential classroom spaces as we look to expand our ability to have classes in different spaces among campus that are accommodating of the social distancing that we're asking of each other. We will need to use portions of the union for medical purposes. So imagine an immunization clinic that would occur in areas of the union. And then we always want to maintain the campus offices that are there that are focused on supporting students and building community, as well as the retail operation. I know the food court means a lot to many of us, and we want to continue to have those food services available. So the union will be open, but it will be functioning a little bit differently.
Some businesses and schools are requiring staff to sign an assumption of risk document. Is that something UConn is considering?
Not at this time.
Will we be given instruction on how to help ensure our students follow the social distancing practices in discussion? What if there is a student who refuses to wear a mask?
So I can certainly share, my office is working very closely with the provost's office on how we can support a culture of participation, and understand also the reasons why some of our students or colleagues may have pre-existing medical conditions that would not allow them to wear a mask. So the provost and I are working very closely on making sure that before we resume classes, we understand why it's important to follow these guidelines, and then also how we can provide tools to our staff and faculty to encourage a culture of participation.
And Ellie, if I could add to that relative to the employee population, if an employee feels they're unable to wear a mask at all times, please notify HR. And we're making every effort to address the mask that you'll be required to wear before returning to campus. A number of, every reasonable effort is being made by EH&S and HR to procure a mask that works for you. We've already had instances where we have been able to find acceptable masks for employees that were concerned based on their own medical condition.
And we believe we can do that for students as well. And so there should be a very small, if and even possibly no individuals for whom we can't find a face covering that will be appropriate. And so we can have a reasonable expectation. And I love the way Ellie laid out, wanting to get everyone to the point where they understand why it's important in doing it. But we also will have the ability, in the same way instructors or other folks are able to address things that we have said is required or is not required, that there are ways to do that. And so we expect to have systems in place and precautions in place so we can hold folks accountable to that expectation and that requirement.
I heard that we may need to undergo a temperature check before entering the workplace. Is this true? And who would be responsible for this?
So, did you want to start?
No, go ahead.
Well, my understanding is there is some temperature checking going on. It's an optional thing. Right now, it's being going on for the basketball program, I believe, returning to work, and maybe Chris can verify that for me. But generally, it is not a strategy that we're going to be taking on. Really, you can be missing a COVID positive, right, by relying on a temperature check when someone isn't recording a temperature. And so our public health experts out there who have been providing some guidance do really not recommend an on-site screening for temperature. That being said, before you leave home, it's a good thing to do. So check for your temperature, check for signs and symptoms of COVID or any respiratory disease, and stay home when you're sick to keep others safe.
And Terry, to reference the athletic pilot programs, students and employees will have their temperature checked by the UConn athletic staff entering the athletic buildings. These are pilots, and we are concerned about that at this juncture to see what will happen. But your advice is spot on. Please monitor your own signs and symptoms before you leave home. And if you have a temperature, if you have any respiratory symptoms, if you're sick, to the points made across the university leadership in other communications, please stay home.
We had a couple of questions and concerns coming in from Stanford campus and other regional campuses that have their students, their faculty and staff rely on public transportation to get to work. What are we doing in terms of making sure that they're safe and they're taken care of?
I think there's potential exposures every day in almost any different venue that people have. I think the issues that we've been talking about testing is truly important. So let's talk a little bit about tests, because we envision right now a PCR test, and let me explain. That's a test that looks for the virus itself in someone's nose, throat, or other areas of the respiratory tract, again, to determine if there's an active infection with COVID. So upon reentry for our employee population, that's student facing, and as I mentioned, our goal right now is to make it available to all other employees as well, is to address where someone is at the point of reentry. Thereafter, we're reserving the right to test again. But the initial test is where we're focused on. If someone tests negative and continues to work and face the community forward, just like we all do on a daily basis, monitoring their own health will be truly important. Taking their own temperature, as we've mentioned, and monitoring their symptoms. And should someone be sick, as I've mentioned, please stay home, notify your manager, and we'll work through those issues as they happen.
We've gotten a handful of questions wondering about a timeline for employees returning to work. And I know we've kind of addressed that with telecommuting, but maybe we hit on that again.
Sure. Well, as we've mentioned, we know that we have employees who are planned to return to the workplace. Some are already here on campus working. Again, the protocol will be, do they need to be on campus to address critical student-facing work as students return to campus? The timing of that really is almost based on the job and the function and the need as returning students are planned for. What we're going to be asking, and we will be sending out guidance to all managers, is that we will expect employees to receive 2 weeks notice before their reentry date. And in some cases, we know that's not going to be possible, but as a general rule, that's the rule we would like followed as a university. It gives employees an ample amount of time to address the needs of reentry. It gives us an opportunity to ensure that testing occurs where it's necessary or where we're making it available. And it's a good time frame to follow. We will provide managers the protocols on reentry. We expect managers to provide a letter to the employee that we will be sharing a template for that will allow managers to provide the reentry date. It says, I just want to make it clear, reentry dates will probably be very staggered over the next few months. Again, a majority of our employees that are not student facing that can continue to telecommute will be the hallmark of reentry.
Given the uncertainty around childcare and K-12 schooling, does UConn plan to maintain flexibility for remote work and schedule flexibility for parents and guardians?
That's an important question. We know that's a considerable concern. We want to continue to hear from our employees. We know that, as reentry occurs, there will be some jobs that will require us to ask employees to reenter who have childcare needs. Again, I will ask managers and employees to determine flexibility. Is there a rotational program that could occur that would provide some relief? And we want to hear from employees and managers in advance. So if there is considerable concern that flexibility will not be achieved, and someone needs to return to campus, I would ask those employees to reach out to hr@uconn.edu so we can work together to see if there is an alternative solution. The employee sharing program could also provide some relief where a temporary assignment could be achieved to provide some of that relief that is necessary.
With budget restrictions happening, do we have a plan or are there options, I should say, being offered to employees who qualify for retirement given the current circumstances?
Can you repeat that question again?
Are there retirement options being offered to employees who qualify given the circumstances?
Not at this time, other than the normal retirement protocols.
We had a question about students and how it will be determined which students return to campus and how will they be kept safe in the residence halls.
So we'll be opening our residential capacity, but with a reduction. So we will not be opening at 100% capacity of our residence halls. So what that will mean is for all of our students who applied for housing for the fall, which we have the knowledge of exactly who they are, we'll be reaching out to confirm that they want to remain on campus and also that they understand some commitments we're asking of them in order to have the ability to live in housing. And then we'll take those responses and determine that through priorities that have been expressed for the university. So that includes things like academic priorities. So students whose academic requirements necessitate that they live on campus. It includes things like students coming from considerable distance who need to be able to reside on campus, as well as priorities for doing things like allowing the pilot of our athletic teams to occur. So they'll look at the pool within those priorities and then make decisions. We're optimistic we can accommodate the majority of students, and we're hopeful we'll create a campus environment there that will safely follow a residential community that can reduce the opportunity of spread, but will also medically allow us to, once we're aware of a positive, provide a separate medical isolation space where that student would be moved to, quarantining immediately for those who are in contact with those students, and following all of the good public health practice that we have guidance on to try to maintain the health of our campus community. It also allows us to monitor illness among our population and indicate to the university if we're getting to a severe place of illness where we need to reconsider our ability to function healthfully. So all of those models have been created through incredible professionals across UConn stores and UConn Health, and that's how we'll be approaching residential living in the fall.
It has been said that there was going to be a 2-week resident hall quarantine. What does that entail, and what measures will the university be taking to ensure that the students living on campus and off campus are quarantined during that time?
Mm-hmm. It has been said, and it is true. So this allows, we don't want to be reliant on one factor. We want to have the most comprehensive process and standards in place to ensure the greatest health of our population. And so that means, of course, we'll be testing our students with a focus on our residential students, but we don't have complete confidence on one test result in one time. And the 2-week quarantine allows us to supplement that statement of health that we get from the test to build, in effect, a bubble around the residential campus and around UConn, where we've limited movement of students and the ability to acquire COVID in other areas, and kept that bubble in place on campus so we can have the healthiest community that we have. However, as I talk to students, and I'm sure this is on your minds as well, this is not medical isolation, and I wouldn't have confidence in a model that said to thousands of students, you have to stay in your room and you can't go anywhere. This is a quarantine model. So students will be told that they need to base themselves in their residential community, but they will be allowed to go outside. They will have to wear a mask, and there will not be large gatherings for them to attend or risk exposure to the community. And we'll do that while we are testing those thousands of students to ensure we have the healthiest campus before we start classes.
A question about testing. Will there be testing sites on our various campuses, or will everyone have to go to UConn Health or the STORS campus for testing?
It's a good question. I'd be happy to take that answer. Right now, and again, this is going to become more fully apparent in the weeks ahead, but we're working with UConn Health, and our goal right now is to develop a drive-through at STORS, as well as a drive-through for Farmington. The expectation, and let's just discuss Farmington, would be that our law school, Hartford and Waterbury locations would use that drive-through because of proximity. For Stanford and Avery Point, we would right now, we're contemplating a stand-up test site at those locations. But the STORS drive-through, I think, would provide the heaviest volume of employees who have needs regarding traveling any further.
Is there any talk of the possibility of some positions being made permanently remote?
Not at this time. But again, as I mentioned under the first question that we had about redundancy, I think the pandemic will provide us an opportunity to determine what does work look like in the future. But at this time, no is the answer.
Will there still be activities like sports clubs despite the social distancing attempts? And then a follow-up to that is, what is the status of having events on campus?
So I can start with the second question, which is we are right now reviewing within a student-facing focus. So think all of student activities, every event that we would have put on in the fall, and seeing if that's possible, given what Terry was sharing, in that we're not going to be allowing large crowds of individuals to campus for a variety of reasons, including the concerns that were expressed earlier about visitors. So that is a process that is going on right now as we review each and every one of the current events and activities that we have on campus. Fraternity and sorority rush is another one that comes to mind. And making determinations on whether those can proceed. The guidance there is what Terry has shared, which is we do not want large gatherings with large amounts of people in one place. And then from that, we will also articulate what are the appropriate sized gatherings that we can have. So we could, for example, in my world in student life, allow student groups to meet, but at reduced sizes, somewhat similar to what we're doing in classroom spaces. So those two pieces are being evaluated by a group right now. They'll have their final recommendations out in July, and we'll implement from there. But there will be a fall without large events led by our students. We'll be recalibrating those and bringing them back a bit. Athletics, I'm less informed on, so I'll defer to my colleagues, but our outlook in event planning is that.
I mean, athletics is working towards a return to fall competition, but as Ellie said, it'll look quite different. We're not anticipating large crowds attending these events, but there are strategies that we're working toward to allow the students to compete against each other safely, or at least safe from infection. Broken bones and all the things that happen in football still may occur, but the strategy there is really about testing and isolation. So there's a phased approach that's being developed, and in coordination with the NCAA, and you can imagine the strategy is you have a team before a competition that is kept in isolation until the results from a test come back, and the same for the other team. And if all of the players are infection free, then they can compete against each other without risk. And so that would have to be done prior to each competition. But there's big advances in testing, and that may be possible, but that's what we're working toward. And as has been mentioned, we have pilot programs going on now with basketball this week, and we're working towards the football team returning July 1st. We haven't met all of the criteria for them to return, but we're optimistic. We're making progress towards those criteria. So it's a work in progress.
We had a question about with the rise of positive test numbers in many U.S. states, is the university considering a return to campus restriction for out-of-state students?
We are not. We will evaluate student health, and obviously if a student is positive, we will be sending them home or putting them in medical isolation, but we won't be excluding access to the university based on a student's state or country of origin.
What are the plans, if any, for students going home or to other places on the weekends or over long breaks?
We really want you to stay on campus. And it's that bubble concept is something that I can't emphasize enough. If our goal is the prolonged health and safety of our community, then we really need to limit our interaction beyond the campus, particularly when we're your home. And I want to say this is a struggle for the regionals as well. But when we have residential responsibilities on our campus, we are even more dedicated to making sure we control the spread that causes by interaction with others. So we really don't want students to go home for breaks. We want you to stay on campus. We're going to indicate that to you in the housing contracts and in the agreements that you sign when you return to campus. And by you, I apologize. I'm so used to talking to students. I realize I'm talking to fellow colleagues right now. But I want us to be forthcoming with the students about what we need to do collectively to be a healthy campus. I don't want there to be any ambiguity. And that includes things like wearing a face mask and staying on campus and developing, appropriate standards for the regionals as well that is responsible to the environment of a commuter population. But I think it's important that we be very clear with our student body what our expectations are for us to maintain health and safety.
We had a question from YouTube about if faculty and staff would be able to get those guidelines for gathering sizes or where they might be hosted that they could go and refer to.
So maybe I'll chime in here. So currently we're really following state guidelines along those lines. Just last week, for example, indoor maximum group sizes were 10, and just today that changed to 25. So we'll really be following the state guidelines as much as possible to match with our unique situation within the university.
We did have a question about the rec center since gyms are starting to open up across the country, and especially in Connecticut. Where do we stand with opening the new rec center?
We'll be prepared to have the rec center opened in the fall, but again, at a reduced capacity, similar to what I think you'll see in gyms right now as they reopen.
One final question for everyone. Do you have plans if, despite best efforts, we end up with a spike in infections throughout campus?
This is Hans. As part of our requirements to plans to reopen for the fall, we do have to submit a plan to the state for their approval on what we would do if a spike occurred on campus, and we are working with monitoring conditions not only on campus but in the surrounding communities with our state health partners.
And we have academic plans for how we would go about trying to address that. I mean, part of it depends when it happens, where it would happen, but these things will be in place.
Okay. Was that it, Emily?
Yeah, we're at our hour mark. So
Okay, so let me just conclude by thanking everyone for these really thoughtful questions. And thank the panelists for their answers and their hard work. I'm so proud of our team and the hard work they're doing to prepare for a successful reentry. I recognize that for everyone here, this is uncharted waters, and that not every question is answered in advance. But as we develop answers to the questions with health and safety in mind for the entire community as our #1 prerogative, our goal is to continue to be transparent through communications and town halls and any other mechanisms we can use to keep you informed and answer your questions. So thanks for coming today. Keep asking those questions, and together we'll work through